Hey guys, this is Adam, and I just want to give you a week in review. We just finished Quest 1, so congratulations. We're on to the next week now, but let's make sure we know what was going on in week 1. So last week we did start learning about web design. So the very basic things that we started to learn about were in the first couple chapters of your book. And you're definitely going to want to get the book Learning Web Design because you're going to have a lot of good information. There's going to be a few exercises that we're going to need to accomplish through there. But as we go through these chapters, it's important to realize the concepts that are in these early chapters because we're really going to just jump into the HTML after this point, and you're going to have to take a look at all these other social factors, and we'll go through certain things on the side as to how the web is actually built up, not just on a technical standpoint, but how other people socially accept it. So once we get into the web, you're going to have to remember the things that web designers do, user experience, interaction design, making these nice interfaces. These are all components that are going to factor in. And there's a lot of technical stuff that you're going to be doing, mostly just markup, HTML and CSS this semester. So we're not going to do really too much of the serious programming, which is the behaviors. That's more of a JavaScript that you're going to want to jump into after a class like HTML and CSS. So as we get forward, though, we really need to start understanding some of the process of getting from point A to point B, so the development of a web page. You can't just jump in there and start coding. We are going to start learning about tags and learning about the structure of a document, and then we're going to visit how you might start planning a complete layout. But it's important to get some basic understanding first, so that's what we'll be doing first. But just a reminder, and let's take a look through this book here, that first chapter, starting on page 3 there, you can learn where you start. So things like the languages that you're going to need, what certain web designers are going to do, and the software equipment that you need to buy or have. We did talk about that in class. We will be using Text Wrangler, also FileZilla as our FTP. You can use Notepad++ and FileZilla as well on your PC. So I actually use both. I really like Notepad++. Since we're in the BCC lab, we're going to continue with our text editor. So in a little bit here, I'm going to jump into both those and just review those since we talked about them last week. But just going on in these chapters, there's a lot of great information about directory structure, site diagrams, wireframes, things like that. So definitely take a look at that. This one's on page 6. You can take a look right here. And let me zoom in. You can see that we have some site diagrams that really help you lay out where your pages are going to be so you understand what you're going to be building, what you're going to be linking to. In Chapter 2, we talked a little bit more about how the web works. We got a little bit more into it, differentiated between the World Wide Web and the Internet, and also a little bit more about servers and getting that information. Now, one of the big concepts that you're going to have to know as we get further on in this class is that concept of the URL, knowing how to break the different pieces apart, especially the absolute path portions. So as we work in our directories in our FTP, we're going to be creating a lot of different folders or directories, as we can call them, and we're going to be putting information in there, and we're going to need to know how to link directly to the information that you're going to need to turn in and link to other documents within your websites. So definitely take a look at this. This is on page 24 of your book. Now going a little bit further down, you're going to start learning about the index file. Now that being the very important file in all these directories. As you have an index file, you can just link to the directory and not actually have to type out index.html. It'll automatically bring up that file as the first file in that page. So we're going to use that so we can shorten up some of those URLs, and people aren't going to have to always be typing in this long URL to get to the information that you're doing, nor are you going to have to type in long URLs as you link documents to documents. But we're going to get a little bit more into URLs and the various things as we get on in our next chapters. Now, there's also some information that we want to take a look at in regards to anatomy of a web page. Now, we didn't jump into the nitty-gritty details, but there's these things called tags that we're going to learn about. We're going to learn about what goes in those tags, how they're called elements and whatnot. And we briefly went over in class what an HTML document looks like and how you can reference to some various files. We did the one with the food and the spoons, and we were able to see how it might be requested across a browser to a server, back to the browser, and back to the server, and that you would eventually get a web page. So these are important concepts to know how the web pages are flowing across the internet, and so that we can make sure we optimize the different resources that we have included into our web files. But now let's go take a quick look at some of the other things that we did last week. So we had an enrichment where you had to send me a Gmail. That was great. Everyone did that. The other aspect of that was to use this text editor, or text wrangler. So if you go into this text wrangler, what it is plain text. We discussed what plain text was. It's just a way that you cannot format any of the text. So what we're going to be doing in the future is we're going to be using this to type all of our HTML code. So you'll notice that I just put a little angle bracket in there, and as I continue going through this code, you'll start seeing things like doc type as being one of the very first things that you would type into your code. Now, I'm going to be doing a lot of explanation of these tags as we go forward, but just for this particular lesson, I wanted to show you that we are going to be using HTML. So the doc type that we'll be using is HTML. That's all we're going to have to put in it. You're going to see a lot longer doc types and various other documents that we'll see in the future. Now, this isn't the official lesson on HTML. I'm just giving you an idea that you see that I type in every little thing that we're going to be doing. So we're going to be typing in HTML. We're going to have a thing called a head that we end up using. We're going to have to close our tags. So you'll see that I have to put that slash in there. We'll also have things like the body. This is a very generic HTML page that I'm creating right now, but I'm doing it all inside of a text document. So that's an important concept, that all of these HTML files are really just comprised of text. But we're going to be doing all that text editing in either Text Wrangler, if you got Text Wrangler on the Mac, or we're going to do it over on Notepad++ if you're on the PC. So that kind of covers what Text Wrangler is. Now, it's also nice and important to remember that when you go ahead and save these files, so I'm going to save this one to my desktop right now. Go here. You're going to have a file on the desktop. We're also going to be changing these file names and these extensions. So this file, I'd go ahead and click this file name. I might name it index.html in certain cases. Sometimes I might be changing this extension at the back to a .css or potentially a .php or maybe an ASP. These are various different extensions that you'll need to be able to change your files to. So it's important to understand that you're going to be doing that. So for most of the cases, we're going to be using the HTML extension. So there we go, and we've just changed that extension. Now we'll get into it a little bit more as to what we're going to be doing with some of these files and how we're going to structure them. Another important concept to realize is how to create a directory. So a directory is just a folder. So here's a folder. I'll go ahead and put that folder there. I can go ahead and change the name of that folder, so you call that something like your website, and you want to put all your files into that one folder, and that becomes your entire website. You can transport that, you can put it on a jump drive, you can do things with it. Now once you have that website set up and you start wanting to put things on the line, you're going to use an FTP. So here's FileZilla. We have FileZilla set up, and there's a few things that I wanted to point out. Now you're going to have these buttons at the top. And now I have different icon sets that I've set up. Really, if you go into this FileZilla preferences, there's a lot of great things that you can set up in this area. I'm not going to go through all these little pieces here, but if you go down this list, you can kind of read on the right as to what items you might want to look at. Now, right now, in the themes, you can click in there, and there's actually a few different types of themes. So I can go to Classic. It always is in the 16 by 16 pixels. There's a few other ones that you might want to choose from. Basically, this is just adjusting your icons on the interface, and you can adjust the size if you like them really large, medium, or small. So, for example, I'm going to put mine all back to small. And if you go down, there's one other thing that's pretty nice. If you go to this file editing screen, you can default your custom file editor to your Text Wrangler app or your Notepad++, and so you can open a file and edit it essentially off of the FTP, and it's going to open up in a temporary file on your PC or your Mac, and then you'll be able to send it right back into the FTP and make that update. So you're not really having to update a file locally and send it over into the FTP. It's kind of all done through the FTP. But in most cases, this will just allow you to view files as well pretty quickly right off your FTP, as long as you're on a computer that has both those applications on it. So go ahead and set that up. And once we get into the FTP, we have to make sure we have it configured correctly. So you'll remember that there's these 4 buttons here, and you can kind of turn them on and off. If you turn them all off, you'll have really 2 sides, your local side and your server side. So what we want to be able to do is log into this server side, and to be able to do that, you go over to this little button here on the left. It's right under I guess the close button on a Mac. It would just be on the left on the PC, and you're going to get into this interface where you can add sites. So for our particular instance, we want to log into our Gamify EDU site. So I'm going to actually start up a new one right now so you can see how this is done. So I'm going to click a new site. I'm going to go ahead and rename this one. I have a little test site called A Zombie set up. So I will go there. In my host, I will want to put Gamify EDU dot, well, that's not edu, that's a y, edu.org. Okay? So once you have gamifyedu.org in that host, you can use just normal FTP, file transfer protocol. We're going to use plain FTP. And down in the login type, I want you to change it to ask for password. And then what you do is you put in your username. So in my case, it is a zombie. In your case, it would be your probably your last name or the last few first initial, second initial, last name, something to that effect. So once you get all that information input, you can't actually change the password, but you'll hit connect, and then you'll get this prompt that you can put in your password. So you'll enter in your password there, and then right when you hit OK on this right-hand side, it should connect and you'll get into your folder. So now actually I already have Quest 2 set up for this next week, so you should at this point all have something that looks like this, an index file from last week's Quest. It should be index.txt, and then you'll also have a Q2, which stands for Quest 2. Inside Quest 2, you'll find your objective for the week, and you'll have to look at some of your information in your objective as to what the details are, but in that objective file, you'll find your files that you'll need to start editing and working with for the week. And so finally, we're going to work with HTML markup for structure for week 2. So be sure to start reading part 2, a lot of the information on markup. I'll give you some specific chapters in class. On Tuesday, be sure to get right into that enrichment when you get in class. It's automatically going to turn on right before class. Remember, we have 2 enrichments every week. You always have to do it for the first 15 minutes of class. And then we'll jump into some of the actual hands-on work with HTML markup. All right, guys, I'll see you in class. Thanks. Peace.